The votes are in. The signs are coming down. The consultants are sending invoices. And somewhere in Indiana right now, a candidate who spent 6 straight months posting pancake breakfast selfies is asking the most painful question in politics. How did I lose? Some people won elections. Some people won excuses. And some people learned that yard signs are not, in fact, a voter outreach strategy. May 5th was not the finish line. It was the sorting hat. It told us who survives to November, who gets politely escorted to political hospice, and who is currently writing a Facebook post that begins with, after prayerful consideration, which is political code for this went much worse than I expected. This primary was not subtle. Republicans held a public loyalty test, and Donald Trump graded it personally. Democrats had their own argument. Do we play it safe, or do we finally swing at the system instead of politely asking it to improve? Some districts chose progressives, some chose moderates, and every one of those choices tells us something about November, because primaries are confessions. They tell you what voters actually believe when no one is watching. Not what campaigns say, what voters do. And what Indiana voters did on May 5th was loud. They told Republicans loyalty matters. They told Democrats electability depends on the district. And they told every candidate still standing November starts now. Because people love pretending democracy happens in November. One Tuesday, one sticker, one patriotic selfie, and suddenly everyone feels morally superior. But power moves earlier than that. It moves in primaries. It moves in low turnout races. It moves when the most powerful people are still saying, I'll pay attention later. Later is how other people choose for you. And Indiana is very good at learning that question the expensive way. Tonight is not a deep dive. No 10-minute history lesson. No dramatic reenactment of Andrew Jackson ruining democracy. This is simpler. What happened? Who won? Who lost? And what November now looks like for both parties. Congressional races, state house races, state senate races, the races that shape your taxes, your schools, your hospitals, and your utility bill, even if they never trend online, because elections are funny like that. People ignore them right up until they become personal. And trust me, they always become personal. Coming up are the winners, the losers, the Republican fallout, and the Democratic divide, and the receipts. Because if politics produces anything in abundance besides disappointment and oddly aggressive campaign mailers, it's receipts. And here, we read them out loud with the names. Because somebody should say something is how cowards outsource responsibility. We don't do that here. The primary didn't end the election. It told us what kind of election we're about to have. And for some people, that should be terrifying. Welcome back to Hold 'em Accountable. I'm Derek Holder. This episode is our primary recap. The morning after. No spin, no campaign brochure language. No, we're excited about the path forward, which is usually political code for we are absolutely panicking. Just reality. Because May 5th gave us clarity, and clarity is dangerous. It showed us that Trump still owns Republican primaries in Indiana. It showed us that Democratic voters are making strategic choices, not just ideological ones. And it reminded everyone that state house and state senate races matter far more than people realize. Because while everyone is watching Congress, your life gets decided in Indianapolis. So tonight, let's start where all good political autopsies begin, what actually happened on May 5th. Before we start handing out trophies and political obituaries, let's answer the most important question first. What actually happened on May 5th? Because every campaign wants to tell you a story. Victory speeches always sound like destiny. Concession speeches always sound like the voters simply weren't ready for greatness. Both are usually fiction. So let's stick to facts, because facts are less emotional and much meaner. The first thing this primary told us was simple. Turnout still rules everything. Not endorsements, not mailers, not Facebook posts with dramatic black and white profile pictures. Turnout. Who showed up? Who stayed home? Who understood that May mattered? Because in Indiana, especially in safe districts, the primary is often the real election. November is frequently just the paperwork, and nowhere is that clearer than congressional races. Let's start with the 4th. This district remains deeply Republican, which means the Democratic primary becomes the real fight for relevance. And Drew Cox came out of that primary with a very clear message. He defeated 3 former congressional candidates in the process, including familiar names who had run before and had already built in recognition. That matters because voters were not choosing the safest familiar option. They chose the progressive candidate. They chose the candidate who represented movement over memory. Not, let's try the same thing again. Let's try something sharper. That tells you the Democratic primary voters in the 4th were not looking for caution. They were looking for energy. Now, yes, November against Republican Congressman Jim Baird is still a mountain, but Democrats made a statement with who they want to climb it. Now, in the 5th, this one may be the most revealing Democratic primary of the cycle, because here voters made the opposite choice. Sitting Indiana State Senator J.D. Ford defeated progressive favorite Jackson Franklin. That is not a small result, because this was not just candidate versus candidate. This was moderate versus progressive, institutional experience versus insurgent momentum. And Democratic voters chose Ford. They chose the moderate. They chose perceived electability. They chose someone they believe can survive November against Victoria Sparks over someone who may have inspired more ideological excitement. That tells us something important. Democrats are not moving in one clean direction. They are making district by district decisions about risk. And in Indiana's 5th, they chose caution over revolution. Twitter is not a precinct, and primary voters reminded everyone of that. Now, in Indiana 6, this district stayed exactly what it has been, a difficult road for Democrats. Republican incumbent Jefferson Shreve survived his own primary and moves forward in a district Republicans expect to hold. And Democrats stayed true with Dr. Cindy Worth. Again, a progressive choice, not a flashy consultant-approved pick, not a safe placeholder, a progressive candidate built around values, consistency, and issue credibility. Because in a tough district, Democrats could have defaulted to pure moderation as a survival instinct. They didn't. They stayed with Worth. That says voters were willing to prioritize conviction even in a difficult map. That is not accidental. That is intentional. And then there's Indiana's 9th, one of the most fascinating races of the night, because Southern Indiana punishes people who think national politics can substitute for local trust. Brad Meyer proved that. He defeated former congressional candidate Tim Peck, the 2024 nominee, along with a competitive field, and finished first with nearly 38% of the vote. Again, voters had a familiar option. They passed. They chose Meyer, the progressive. They chose a new messenger over the comfort of the known name. That is a real signal. Indiana's 9th voters were not interested in reruns. They wanted forward pressure, not nostalgia. That matters heading into November against Republican incumbent Aaron Houchin, because message matters and messenger matters more. Now step back and look at the full Democratic picture, because this is where it gets interesting. 3 progressive wins, 1 moderate win. Cox, Meyer, Worth. Progressives, Ford, moderate. It's not an accident. It's a map. And that map tells us this. Indiana Democrats are not having one argument. They are having 2 at the same time. In redder districts, voters are saying, if we're climbing uphill anyway, send someone who actually believes in the climb. That favors progressives. But in battleground districts like the 5th, voters are saying winning comes first. That favors moderates. This is not ideological confusion. It's strategic adaptation. Districts are choosing the fighter they think fits the fight. That's smart politics, Messy, but smart. And it also sets up one of the biggest stories of the entire general election. What kind of Democratic Party is Indiana actually building? One that manages the system or one that tries to change it? That debate did not end on May 5th. It got louder. Now zoom out. Senate House and state Senate races may matter even more because everyone watches Congress. But your daily life? That gets decided in Indianapolis. This cycle made something painfully clear. Republicans were not debating policy, they were debating survival. 5 Trump backed challengers defeated incumbent Republican state senators who opposed his redistricting push, and 7 GOP Senate incumbents lost overall, the highest number since Ballotpedia started tracking in 2010. That's not disagreement, that's enforcement. The message was simple: disagree with Trump publicly, and your next campaign becomes a cautionary tale. So, what actually happened on May 5th? Simple. The mask came off. The primary clarified priorities. It showed us where parties are strong, where they're bluffing, and where candidates discovered that fundraising emails do not count as field operations. That lesson arrives every cycle, usually expensive, always educational. This primary didn't settle everything, but it revealed the battlefield. And once you know the battlefield, you stop listening to slogans and start watching movement. Who gained momentum? Who lost oxygen? Who suddenly started using the phrase after prayerful reflection? Those are the tells. And politics, like poker, is mostly about reading tells. Who were the real winners of the night? Not just candidates, movements, messages, and the people who walked away with more power than they had the week before. Let's fix something right away, because if we're going to do this right, we do not tell comforting lies. This was not a normal primary. This was not a good night for incumbents. This was not steady as she goes election. This was a message, loud, expensive, and impossible to ignore. So let's talk about the real winners of the night. And spoiler alert, incumbency did not make the list. The first winner? Democratic enthusiasm. Not because Democrats suddenly solved all their problems. They absolutely did not. Democrats can turn a strategy meeting into a hostage situation faster than anyone in American politics. But this primary showed something important. Democratic voters showed up in key contested races, especially congressional and legislative primaries. Turnout and engagement were stronger than many expected. That matters because midterms are often decided less by persuasion and more by who still is angry enough to put on shoes and vote. Right now, Democrats are still angry about healthcare, about schools, about reproductive rights, about utility bills, about the general feeling that life now costs extra for no apparent reason. Anger is not a platform, but it is excellent turnout fuel, and Democrats had more of it. That matters heading into November. Now let's talk about the biggest winner. And no, it wasn't traditional conservatism. It was Trump. Specifically, Trump's ability to turn a primary into a political execution. 5 Trump-backed challengers defeated incumbent Republican state senators who had opposed his push for congressional redistricting. 5. That's not influence. That's enforcement. Senators like Jim Buck and Travis Oldman weren't beaten because voters suddenly forgot their names. They were beaten because the message was clear. Disagree with Trump, and your next campaign becomes a public warning to everyone else. Millions of dollars poured into these races from Trump-aligned groups and allies. Estimates range from roughly 8 million to more than 10 million targeting these contests. This wasn't a primary. It was a loyalty audit, and the result was simple. Trump passed. Incumbency failed. Another winner? National political theater. And frankly, I hate that this is true, because it is. Local issues should win local races. Roads, schools, hospitals, taxes, utility regulation. Instead, too often, candidates ran like they were auditioning for cable news, not for the state house, not for Congress, for clips, for national attention, for the chance to become a guest panelist yelling into a split screen. And too often, it worked, especially in Republican primaries, where identity politics and national loyalty tests overwhelmed local legislative records. People weren't always voting who fixed the road, they were voting for who fought the right enemy on television. That is politically effective, but it's also how potholes survive forever. This one is uncomfortable, but honest. Fear one, not voter fear, political fear. Republican lawmakers watch colleagues get taken out not by Democrats, but by their own primary voters after Trump endorsements landed. That changes behavior immediately. People stopped asking what policy is best and started asking what survives May. This is how institutions change, not through speeches, through consequences. After this primary, every Republican office holder in Indiana understands the assignment. Loyalty is no longer implied, it is required. That is a massive winner, whether you like it or not. And finally, the people everyone forgets until election night, primary voters. The people who know filing deadlines, the people who vote in May, the people who understand that in Indiana, especially in safe districts, the primary is often the real election. Those voters are not the problem. They are the proof that participation still matters, proof that local power still moves early, proof that if you understand the calendar, you understand the country. Because if you wait until November to care, someone else already made the decision for you. Trust me, they did not consult your group chat first. So those were the winners: Democratic energy, Trump's enforcement machine, national political theater, fear as strategy, and the voters who understand that the election starts long before most people are paying attention. But politics is balance. For every winner, there's someone currently saying, "We're proud of the campaign we ran," which is political code for "we are absolutely not paying for those yard signs." Now we get to the part nobody puts in the victory speech: the losers. And no, I don't just mean the people who lost their races. Sometimes the biggest losers are ideas, assumptions, entire political strategies that looked brilliant in January and by May were basically a flaming shopping cart rolling downhill. This primary produced plenty of those. So let's name names respectfully, but not too respectfully. Let's start with the myth that usually survives everything: incumbency. The idea that once you're in office, the hardest part is over. Not this year. This year, incumbency got body slammed. 7 Republican state senators lost their primaries. That's historic. 5 of the 7 Republican senators directly targeted by Donald Trump after opposing his redistricting push were defeated. 1 survived, and 1 race was too close to call immediately after election night. Experience does not protect you when the base decides loyalty matters more than longevity. The old rule was don't lose your district. The new rule is don't lose Trump. That is very different survival strategy. Second loser, moderate Republicans. Or maybe I should say Republicans who still believed disagreement was allowed. Because this wasn't really about ideology. It was about permission. Can you oppose Trump on one major issue and survive? Indiana just answered that question. Mostly no. These senators weren't taken out by Democrats. They were taken out by their own voters. That changes behavior fast. Every Republican lawmaker in Indiana watched this happen. And now every future vote comes with a second question. Is this good policy? Followed immediately by, will this get me primaried? Guess which question wins? That is not party unity. That's political weather forecasting. And everyone just saw the storm. Another loser? Local issues. Again, because too many races got swallowed by national identity politics. Candidates who should have been judged on local legislative work were judged instead on whether they passed the national loyalty test. Who did they support? Who did they anger? Who reposted them? That's not local government. That's WWE with a committee assignment. And Indiana is not immune. We are excellent at pretending Washington is the problem, while ignoring the fact that your county assessor can ruin your week faster than Congress ever will. This one matters. Republican turnout. Yes, Republicans won major races. Yes, the Trump machine flexed hard. but turnout itself showed softness. Lower enthusiasm in parts of the Republican base matters because November is not a primary. Fear motivates primaries. Fatigue destroys generals. Some Republicans are showing signs of fatigue. That doesn't mean collapse. It means vulnerability, especially in places like Indiana's 5th and Indiana's 6th, where margins matter and suburban voters are allergic to chaos. If Republicans assume the primary energy automatically transfers to November, they may discover politics has a very dark sense of humor. And yes, Democrats belong on this list too, because higher turnout is good, but clarity still matters. Democrats had energy. What they still struggle with is coherence. Are they running on economic pain, healthcare, democracy protection, anti-MAGA messaging, kitchen table issues, system reform? Yes, all of it, which is also the problem. A coalition is not a message, and Democrats still too often campaign like everyone should already understand the assignment. Voters do not reward homework they weren't assigned. They reward clarity. And if Democrats want to convert energy into wins in November, clarity needs to arrive quickly, preferably before October. So those were the losers: incumbency, moderate Republicans, local issues, Republican turnout softness, and Democratic clarity. That's a lot of damage for one Tuesday in May. But now comes the bigger question. What does all of this actually mean for November? Because primaries are a diagnosis. The general election is the treatment, and Indiana is about to find out whether either party brought real medicine or just better slogans. Now we get to the question everyone asks the morning after. Okay, so what? What does any of this actually mean for November? Welcome to Indiana politics. Let's start with Republicans, because on paper, they should feel strong. They still dominate statewide. They still control the state house. They still hold the advantage in districts like Indiana's 4th and much of Indiana's 6th, but primaries revealed something dangerous. Winning and stability are not the same thing. The Trump-backed primary wins are a show of force, no question. That proves Trump still controls the Republican primary electorate, but it also creates fallout because purges are great for discipline and terrible for trust. Moderate Republicans didn't disappear. They got quieter. Suburban Republicans in places like Indiana's 5th still exist. Business conservatives still exist. Voters who want lower taxes but would also prefer politics not to feel like a hostage negotiation, they still exist. In November is where those voters matter, especially if Democrats can make competence look more attractive than chaos. That's the opening. Small, but real. Now let's talk about Democrats, because Democrats had better turnout energy, especially in places like Marion County, where primary participation topped the last 4 midterm cycles. More than twice as many Democrats cast ballots compared to Trump's first midterm. That matters. Energy matters because enthusiasm without discipline is just a group project nobody survives. Take Indiana's 5th. Indiana Democrats are already signaling that district is a major target. That race becomes a test case. Can Democrats turn suburban frustration into actual votes? Or are they still confusing social media applause with field operations? Because those are not the same thing. One wins arguments, the other wins the elections. Indiana's 9th matters too, because Democrats need trust there. Not branding, not consultant-approved slogans. Trust. That takes time. In November is not patient. State House and State Senate races may be even more important, because while everyone argues about Congress, your life gets decided in Indianapolis. And after this primary, Republican lawmakers now know exactly what happens if they cross Trump. That means legislation changes, behavior changes, votes change. Even if Democrats don't flip seats, the environment changes. That matters a lot. And let's be honest, November will not just be Republican versus Democrat. It will be exhaustion versus motivation. Who is tired? Who is angry? Who still believes voting changes anything? That's the real race, because voters right now are carrying a lot. Higher bills, healthcare frustration, housing pressure, childcare costs, political burnout. People are tired. and tired voters are unpredictable. Sometimes they stay home, sometimes they show up furious. Campaigns are basically trying to guess which version arrives, usually badly. Here's the simplest version. Republicans enter November with structural power. Democrats enter November with emotional momentum. One side has the machine, the other side has the anger. History says the machine usually wins, but history also says people get weird when life gets expensive, and life is very expensive. So this race is not over, not even close. The primary didn't decide the future, it decided the battlefield. Who has the hill? Who lost the bridge? Who is pretending everything is fine while quietly updating donor call sheets? That's what May gave us. And November? November tells us whether any of them learned the lesson. This is my favorite part because this is where opinions get handcuffed by evidence. No spin, no consultant poetry, no internal polling suggest, just receipts. And receipts are rude. Let's begin. 7 Republican Indiana senators lost their primaries. 7. That's the highest number since Ballotpedia began tracking this in 2010. That was not just a rough cycle, it was historic. 5 of those incumbents were directly targeted after opposing Trump's push for mid-decade congressional redistricting. This was not random voter dissatisfaction. This was organized political enforcement. The message was simple: disagree publicly, lose public. More than $8 million, some estimates closer to $10 million, was poured into Indiana's Republican Senate primaries by Trump-aligned groups and outside organizations. $8 to $10 million for state Senate races. That's not normal. That is someone deciding Indiana was important enough to send a message through. And they did. Money doesn't guarantee victory, but it definitely rents a very loud megaphone. And in low turnout primaries, volume matters a lot. In Marion County alone, Democratic primary turnout exceeded the last 4 midterm cycles. Even more telling, more than twice as many Democrats voted compared to Trump's first midterm primary cycle. That doesn't automatically mean Democratic victories in November, but it absolutely means energy. And elections run on energy, especially when the other side starts assuming inevitability. That's how surprises happen. This one doesn't come with a single number. It comes with your monthly bills, property taxes, state policy, school funding, state policy, healthcare access, state policy, utility regulation, state policy, reproductive rights, state policy. People obsess over Congress while the state house quietly decides whether your hometown gets a hospital or a headline about losing. That imbalance is political malpractice. In every election cycle, we repeat it like it's a tradition. Primary turnout in Indiana usually sits dramatically lower than general election turnout. In many districts, fewer than 20% of eligible voters decide who's going to appear on the November ballot. And in safe districts, that primary winner is often the actual winner, meaning a small slice of voters is effectively choosing representation for everyone else. That's not hyperbole, that's arithmetic. And arithmetic does not care about your yard sign. So there they are, the receipts, not opinions, not vibes, not campaign emails that begin with friend, facts. And facts are inconvenient because they do not care how anyone feels. They simply sit there, waiting for someone honest enough to read them out loud.
Oh, hi there. Do you live in Indiana? Are you watching this video? Come on in. I'm Blythe Potter. I'm running for Secretary of State. I'm a veteran, small business owner, a mom, and a lifelong Hoosier. I'm building a grassroots campaign focusing on talking to the people, not the establishment. So help me spread the message that Hoosiers deserve better from our elected officials. Oh, hey, before you go, introduce yourself in the comments and share this with a fellow Hoosier. Bye now.
The votes have been counted. The winners have posted their humbled and honored statements. The losers have discovered a sudden passion for family time and private sector opportunities. And somewhere, a campaign manager is still insisting the internal polling was actually very strong. Politics is a beautiful, ridiculous thing. But let's end where this whole episode began. May 5th did not end the election, it revealed it. It showed us what Indiana voters actually wanted when the cameras were off and the consultants weren't writing talking points. Republicans made one thing very clear: Trump is not a factor, he is the gravity. The question inside the Republican Party is no longer whether he leads, it is whether anyone can survive disagreeing with him. Primary answered that with all the subtlety of a folding chair at a county fair debate. Moderates didn't just lose arguments, they lost offices, and every Republican office holder in Indiana noticed. That matters for Congress. That matters for the state house. That matters for November, because loyalty is now policy, and that changes everything. Democrats told a more complicated story: 3 progressive wins, 1 moderate win. Cox in Indiana's 4th, Meyer in the 9th, Worth in the 6th, all progressive choices. Ford in Indiana's 5th, the moderate lane. That matters because it tells us Indiana Democrats are not having one argument, they're having 2. In red districts, voters are saying, if we're climbing uphill anyway, send someone who actually believes in the climb. Battleground districts, they're saying winning comes first. That's not contradiction, that's strategy. Messy, sometimes frustrating, but strategy. And it sets up one of the biggest fights of the general election. What kind of Democratic Party is Indiana trying to build? One that manages the system or one that tries to change it? That argument did not end on primary night. It got louder. And frankly, it should. This is also where I remind people your state house race probably affects your life more than Congress. Your state Senate race probably affects your life more than cable news. Your county offices, sheriff, clerk, assessor, auditor, judge can absolutely ruin your Tuesday faster than Washington ever could. That's not glamorous. It's just true. Power is usually boring right up until it becomes expensive. Then suddenly, everyone pays attention. Usually, too late. The biggest lesson from this primary is not who won, it's when power moves. People keep treating democracy like it begins in November. It doesn't. It begins in primaries. It begins in filing deadlines. It begins in races people ignore because nobody made a dramatic TV ad about them. That is where your options get decided. That is where your future gets narrowed. And if you wait until October to care, you are not making a choice. You are inheriting one. That is the trap. People think apathy looks like not voting. Most of the time, it looks like waiting too long. And from here, we keep going. From now until the end of August, every week is a deep dive. Not surface level nonsense. Real issues. Utility monopolies. Healthcare deserts. Why working full time still feels like financial parkour. Why childcare costs more than rent. Why poverty somehow comes with a premium subscription fee. The local power structure nobody understands until it sends them a bill. We are going straight at it because if politics is going to keep showing up in your wallet, your hospital, and your child's school, then we're going to keep dragging it into the light. No fluff, no safe topics, just receipts. And then, when August ends, we enter the sacred season. Interview Palooza 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yes, the title stays. No, I will not be taking feedback. That means candidate interviews, congressional candidates, state house candidates, state senate candidates, local races actually shape daily life. No softballs, no campaign brochure questions, real conversations. Because democracy does not improve when politicians talk at voters. It improves when voters get loud enough that politicians have to answer. That is the job. That has always been the job. And around here, we intend to be extremely annoying about it. Professionally, of course. So the primary is over. But accountability is not. November starts now. Actually, if we're being honest, November started months ago. Most people just noticed this week. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.